Hi, everybody. Welcome to Farm Stress Real Talk with Penn State Extension. This is Amber from Penn State Extension's Farm Stress team. It's really hard to believe that we're already on our sixth series, but here we are. So, for those listeners who have been following along, we try to create conversations around a common theme for each of our series. So, the episodes you may have already heard for this series and will continue to be hearing will be focusing more on overcoming losses from a variety of perspectives, including how to handle losses using available resources from organizations, as well as personal losses and some personal coping strategies that have worked for people. So, on that note, today I'm joined by Jeff Corley. So, Jeff is a former dairy farmer turned independent country music artist, although some might argue he's a bit of a budding star in the country music world. He's also a keynote speaker and a mental health advocate by virtue of his viral song, Empty Barn. So, as an independent music artist, this is the pretty amazing statistic for me. He's amassed over 300,000 streams and over 70 million social media views. So, really excited to have him on the podcast today and get to pick his brain a little bit. So, I'll hand it over. Jeff, anything else that I'm missing with your introduction?
Yeah, one very important thing, and that is with all of those social media views, I have become a social media influencer for cows.
I guess it doesn't really denote how many cows are seeing those social media postings that you have. So that's true. So there might be a lot of barns that are rocking out to your songs and your music. So all right. So Jeff, we'll get right into it. We'll learn a little bit more about you as the interview goes on, but really excited to talk with you today. And like I said, just talk about your experiences, how you've handled personal losses, but I think what I would really like to start out with for the conversation is just, you've played concerts, you've been to venues throughout Pennsylvania and really beyond. We talked a little bit about some of the other states you've been to. So overall, what kind of reactions are you seeing in your audiences at these concerts and really just within the farming community in regards to how they can handle some of these losses, whether they're actually losses that they're experiencing and going through, or even just some of the losses that, they're worried about and thinking about those potential losses.
Yeah, sure. Well, my whole story begins at the point that we shut down our fourth generation dairy farm and had to sell our cows. So that was the single greatest loss I ever experienced in my life. And from that, just as a coping strategy, I had always messed around with writing songs and playing guitar. So I ended up writing this song about what I was feeling called Empty Barn. And Empty Barn, totally on its own. I mean, I had no idea how to release a song or promote a song or anything like that. I put a friend actually convinced me to put a very simple smartphone recording of Empty Barn up on my farm's Facebook page. I didn't even have a music page or a website or anything at that time. And all on its own, this song Empty Barn started to go viral. And that's where I started to see the reactions. So it resonated with especially other farmers and especially other dairy farmers who had experienced something similar, either currently or oftentimes when they were younger, if mom and dad sold the cows, whatever. And it was really an eye opener for me as to how many people have gone through something similar and were feeling like my song was a way for them to kind of, in some ways, grieve the loss that they had had, but also they saw it as a way that it let other people know that, hey, a lot of people aren't talking about the fact that farmers are going through this. I mean, I know about dairy farming, and what I know since I've been doing this, this statistic just blew my mind because I always used to say when I was growing up, we were surrounded by dairy farms. I'm in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, and in the 2 mile stretch from the highway up to my farm, there were 5 other dairy farms. And of course, we've all heard the story. Now there are none. But at any rate, the statistic that just grabbed my attention was that since the mid 70s, we have lost 95% of dairy farms. 95%. So what I found when Empty Barn came out, and then when the video came out that really went viral, is that there are all these people out there going, grieving the loss of something that practically nobody else understands, which is the loss of your animals, and if you're in your livelihood, and if you're on a small dairy farm, um, like me, and as I found from all those comments, you really come to think of those cows as friends and family members. And it's a loss that I think very few other people understand unless you've experienced it.
Yeah, and I'd almost add on to that too. I mean, obviously the loss of cows and the farm, but even just that loss of identity, thinking to my dad, for example, and just if he didn't have farming, I don't know how he would even identify himself because that's how he's always been. Farming's been his life, it's been in his blood, it's been in his family too. So to just lose that identity, I think, and that um that feeling of self, I think would be really a struggle for a lot of people too to handle and deal with. And there's probably not a lot of people, like you said, that really understand that and the impact of those losses. So like yeah, like I had mentioned, you have a really interesting story from where you started and how you got to be where you are. So you're kind of a anomaly or maybe an exception in the farming world, just because you're more open about sharing some of those experiences, and maybe your own mental health struggles and your challenges that you overcame. So, what was the turning point, I think, for you? What really made you realize that talking or even singing about challenges was an effective healing method or a way for you to work through that? And kind of to piggyback on that too, did you have the support? Do you still have support of family and friends who really encouraged you to be vocal about those challenges? Or how were you perceived, I guess, in the farming world when you first started?
Yeah, well, I guess for me, being that I always wrote songs from a very young age up, I came to understand at some point that writing songs was kind of therapy for me. A lot of songwriters say that. Um, so I think there's a huge element when you're going through something, just the physical act of getting that emotion out of your body. I mean, if you can just envision, when you feel pain, it's inside your body, it's around your heart, it's in your stomach. And so writing, whether, you know, a lot of people journal to express what they're feeling. Um, so just the act of doing something to get that feeling out, for me, it was writing a song. I knew that that was therapeutic or cathartic, if you want to call it. And that's really why I turned to my guitar when I was going through this, loss. And writing Empty Barn was, in fact, a very cathartic, therapeutic experience for me. Now, if it was up to me, that's probably as far as it would have gone. But I did play that song for one friend, and that friend was so moved by the song that she said, "You have to let people know what you're feeling." And that's why, as I said before, I put it up on um, my farm's Facebook page. And the funny thing about that is, when I put it up there, I really didn't have any expectation that anyone was going to download it, let alone send me comments and everything like that. And when I came back to the computer a few hours later and saw that it had been downloaded 300 times, my initial reaction typical farmer reaction was to say to my friend, "Oh, geez, that's great. Now 300 some people know that I'm a total emotional sap, because farmers are supposed to grin and bear it. We're not supposed to put it out there." That song was very personal. And, I was just literally shocked that it had been downloaded 300 times. But as the story goes, it only went downhill from there because by the same time the next day, it had been downloaded over 1,000 times, and the next day 1,000 times more, and it just kept going and going and going. And I guess what I'm trying to say that I learned from that is just doing the writing part, just that physical act of getting that emotion out and expressing myself was only one half of the equation. The other half was once people started to hear it, and then they started to send me comments of love, support, and encouragement. That was really what jump started my healing process, was knowing that other people are going through this. They have gone through it. Other people are willing to, send me these amazing comments. And it led to a joke that I do in my talk, which is I say, as a farmer, I was really surprised to see that here it turns out if you let people know what you're feeling, huh, they're able to help you. Who knew?
Yeah, and I think just realizing that that support exists in the community, especially in the ag community, and so we'll talk a little bit more about those keynote concerts that you've kind of developed and that much needed niche. Um, but when you think about some of the messages that you're really trying to send out there, how, you know, you say guys that look like me. So those of you who are just listening, we obviously aren't doing these visually, but Jeff's got a big bushy beard, super nice, friendly guy, just normal farmer guy that you would see. Honestly, probably one of the last people you would, would think would be talking about mental health. And so I think it's so great. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're trying to normalize that it's okay to speak out, and to tell people about your problems and, really what your messages are, I guess, that you're really trying to get out there to the ag community and people who might be struggling.
Yeah. Well, one of my key points that I make in my keynote concert is I used to say that writing Empty Barn changed my life. But now I understand that there was a step before Empty Barn, and that is, in my case, unwittingly allowing myself to be vulnerable enough to write that song and put those emotions out there. And then vulnerable enough to share it with one person. And the first person that I played it for. And I look back at that and I think, yeah, I just wanted to let this person know that I wrote a song. But really, in reality, I know that it was a cry for help. It was me saying, hey, look at what I'm going through and can you help me? Even though I would have never really even thought about that in my mind. I know that that's what it was. So the point is, guys that look like me, so big farmer dudes with, what did you say, big bushy beard. Somebody else,
Big bushy beards. Yeah. Yep.
somebody described me as having an epic beard. So yeah, so guys that have epic beards, but don't have to have that. It's just true of guys in general, especially farmers, that we are usually not the first ones to raise our hands and say, "Excuse me, I'd like to tell you how I'm feeling today." You know, we have been brought up to grin and bear it. And that kind of is part and parcel of farming. Sometimes you have good weather in the springtime, like we're having now. Sometimes you have horrible weather in the springtime and you can't get anything done. So, what is a farmer's attitude towards that? Well, there's nothing I can do about it. We're going to make the best of it. We're going to get the oats in when we can get the oats in. So farmers have a general mentality of keeping things inside and dealing with it themselves in their own way. that's actually the worst possible thing you can do when you're facing what we could call a mental health crisis. And a lot of people don't even realize they're in a mental health crisis. They just are experiencing, they're feeling bad, they're down, they're feeling stressed, they're feeling anxiety. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a mental health issue or a mental health crisis. And what typically happens with farmers, especially men, is that we just want to keep that inside and we don't want to show people that we're hurting. And that's the worst thing you can do. So, one of the first and most important things that you can take away from anything I do is the need for guys like me to be vulnerable enough to tell someone what they're feeling.
Yeah, and we always say that, it's such a difficult community for outsiders to kind of come into and try to provide training to and support to because of that mentality. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get the work done. And yeah, the weather's not great today, but it'll be good tomorrow. Like we'll get it done. And just internalizing that and keeping it to themselves. And it is really amazing. It's such a positive trait, that resiliency, I think, is what the buzzword that we hear these days maybe, but it's also kind of it is really a negative thing that works against farmers who are going through difficult times. So yeah. We've talked a lot. We've kind of led up to these keynote concerts. And like I said, you've sort of found your niche, I think, when it comes to the farming community, how to get your story out and how to reach the audiences that need to hear your messages and the points that you're trying to put across to them. So really curious to hear how these have developed over time and really what messages, just kind of give us, if you could, a little bit of a brief overview and maybe some highlights of the keynote concerts that you've had and the experiences you've had with people either at these concerts or even just, you know, um, just in your everyday life and interaction with people. Just let us let us in on the life and of Jeff Corley and how these keynote concerts came about.
Yeah, well, I'll try to give you the quick story of this, but after I started to gain some notoriety as an independent music artist, one day out of the clear blue sky, a lady from a major hospital system called me and asked me if I would be willing to speak at their staff mental health awareness day. And this was my honest response that I totally believed this. I said, I'm sorry, you have the wrong person. I'm not a speaker and I don't have anything to do with mental health. And the lady on the other end of the phone laughed and she said, I've been following your story from the beginning. Your story has everything to do with mental health. All we want you to do is come tell your story. And I said, well, okay, I don't know if I agree with you or not, but I will do that under one condition, and that is that I can have my guitar with me so I can perform my song Empty Barn at the end of the talk. And she thought that was a great idea. So I went there to do it, and it was my first experience. Now, when I was younger, I played music in a band. And I was very accustomed to getting on stage and performing. And also, since Empty Barn had happened and I got to do a little bit of touring, I had gotten back into really, enjoying performing and entertaining. But this was the first time I ever stepped onto a stage, looked out at an audience that was stone cold sober and had nothing to do except stare back at me. I had never experienced that before. And let me tell you, my throat went dry, my knees started to shake, and I said, thank goodness I have this guitar here as my crutch. So I gave that talk and just told my story. And they had just had like a 20-minute time slot for me. So I only had time to tell my story and perform Empty Barn. And at the end of the thing, I'm thinking, oh man, I have no idea. The people really seemed to enjoy it and really seemed to respond. But afterwards, the president of the hospital came up to me, and didn't hurt that he admitted that he was a big country music fan, but he was shaking my hand and just pumping my arm vigorously. And he said, "That's one of the best talks we've ever had. Oh my goodness." And he was going on and on. And I almost let it slip, but then I didn't. I almost said, yeah, that was my first one. I don't know. But from that, I realized, okay, this is a way to really connect with audiences that I had never experienced before. And so it so happened that over the course of time, I started to get asked to speak. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it and perform, it's not in a full-blown keynote concert, which is an hour-long typical keynote address. I will essentially tell the story start to finish, and that includes three of my songs, two other ones that have gone incredibly viral that help tell the story. And that's what a keynote concert is. It's essentially me telling my story and including some of my original songs in it.
Awesome. What kind of reactions have what kind of moments maybe have you had or reactions from people who have been at these keynote concerts? Because I know speaking just, from my side of things, if I go and table at events, I'm usually that table that got farm stress, mental health on it, and oh my gosh, they keep about a mile distance, but it's those conversations that I always say when I'm going to the bathroom or if I'm stepping away from the table, it's those one-on-one conversations of people who kind of creep up to you and then start talking, about maybe their relative, a friend, or even maybe sometimes it's been themselves that, yeah, they're having a tough time. So I imagine you've had very similar moments too.
Yeah, well, whenever I do a keynote concert, I always really press the organizer, the event organizer, for me to be able to have a table afterwards so that I can meet people. Because one of the things that I found out is that here again, guys that look like me maybe are not going to go talk to you, especially if you have a sign up that says something about mental health or stress or whatever. Oh, they're going to go. But when they've heard me talk and tell my story, and there I am at a table, it does open, doors for them to come and talk. And I'll tell you one story that kind of exemplifies that and really made me understand that what I was doing, had meaning and was hitting home. And that was, so I did a keynote concert for the National Farmers Organization annual conference out in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, or I'm sorry, Coral City, Iowa. I was very happy that they named a city after me. But um, at any rate, during in the story that leads up to me performing Empty Barn, when I talk about, having to sell the cows and how heartbroken I was and everything like that, I noticed there was a guy in the audience. Now, everybody else in the audience was pretty much in nice clothes. The guys were in jackets, blazers. The gals would have had on, dresses, a skirt, whatever. It was kind of a semi-formal thing. But there was one guy who was actually in bib overalls with a baseball hat on. He was a big guy, epic beard. And I noticed as I would be on stage looking across the audience, as I was leading up to Empty Barn, it looked to me like this guy was getting emotional. And sure enough, while I was singing Empty Barn, he started wiping away tears, which, by the way, totally freaked me out because I like to make eye contact with the audience, and I had to revert back to the old tactic of you look like 6 inches above their heads at a place on the back wall, and it still looks like you're looking at them. But anyway, it just really made me emotional that this guy was really being impacted by the story and the song. And so By the way, I should say that in the keynote concert, after I do Empty Barn, I don't leave you in that, down place. We then the next song that I had that went insanely viral is a very upbeat, happy song about spilling manure on the road and having the cops called on me. So by the end of the show, I bring you back up and we have a good time. And anyway, so I finished the keynote concert. I went out to my table, had a line of people waiting to meet me, and I saw that this guy was in line. And when he got up to me, and I'm 6'2", and this guy was towering over me. I mean, this was a big guy. And he shook his hand, and I realized he was the guy that I had saw getting emotional. So I stood up to shake his hand. And when I did that, he just grabbed me in this incredible bear hug and literally lifted me off the ground. And I always wear a cowboy hat, knocked the cowboy hat off my head and said, and I know we have to be careful here, so I will paraphrase, said to me as he was lifting me up off the ground, "That's the greatest effing song ever. That's the greatest effing song ever," except he really said the word. That's probably going to get edited, isn't it, ever? But at any rate, after he set me back down, I asked him what was going on, what's up? And he told me that his family sold the cows when he was a senior in high school. His whole dream had been that he was going to take over the farm from his dad. And when when his mom and dad made the decision to sell the cows, he was devastated, but he didn't let anybody know about it. In fact, he told me that for the sale, he had to be the one that was strong. He was involved with setting things up and helping to organize and everything. And he never let on how much it had actually affected him, to the extent that he was now married and told me that he had never even told his wife the extent to which he had been devastated by that event. And what he told me, and if I'm not careful, I'll get emotional. What he told me was that that's the first time he let himself cry over the loss of his family farm. And that's when I knew, excuse me, you know, I'm not just up here to entertain people. Um, maybe I'm doing something a little bit deeper.
It's hard to follow that up, but I mean, so, but um, yeah, and like I said, I hate to even start to wrap this up, but man, we could talk, I think, for hours longer, and just some of the stories you have, and you're obviously just a very good a storyteller of telling your story, but just relating to people too. And so that's why I feel like you and I talking is probably not the best idea because we would be chatting for forever. But for the listener's sake, for this episode, anyways, um, I suppose we should kind of start wrapping it up. But so we'll kind of put our plug in here too. Obviously, if you haven't heard the song Empty Barns, we will link it in our show notes. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Jeff's website, www.jeffcorle, Corle, music.com. And again, we'll have those everything in the show notes too to get you to connect with Jeff and contact him if you are interested in bringing a keynote concert to your neck of the woods. I know that we're kind of in the process of working on some dates to bring him up to the Northeast Pennsylvania area here. But like you said, he's a social media influencer now, which is more than I think we can even say, or I can say for myself anyway. So you can find him on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. I don't think I'm following you on TikTok yet, but I will be after this podcast just to see some of that content. And he's available for obviously any sort of speaking events, podcast features such as today, radio interviews and live performances. And really just want to thank you, Jeff. Like I said, gosh, I wish that we had more time just to talk a little bit more about some of the experiences you've had and really the lives you've touched. I mean, because I know that type of guy you're talking about, and just a big burly guy you think would be the last guy to tell anyone how he's truly feeling. So man, that would affect a lot of people and impact a lot of people. And it's so important to know and to realize that what you are doing goes beyond, just a concert or just performing music, but you're reaching audiences that a lot of organizations, aren't going to be able and probably will have difficulty reaching. So, thank you obviously doesn't seem like enough, but just just major kudos. Thank you for the work that you're doing and continue to do and just getting that word out that it's okay to not be okay, especially in the farming community, and that there are people there to help and support you. So, anything else? Any last words before I wrap us up, Jeff?
Yeah, well, just to say thanks, Amber. I mean, I appreciate all your kind words there. And really, I have to say, in the interest of full disclosure, when I first started, I really didn't know anything about the farmer mental health crisis. It was only through experiences like I had with that fella and others that I started to realize, um, there's a deep issue out here. And if I can help anybody by standing up on a stage and being a goofball and telling my story, then that's what I'm going to do. So thank you for this platform and thank you for the wonderful work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's gonna take communities, I feel like. It's gonna take collaboration and people that are willing to work together, I think, to reach everybody and to let people know that there's people and resources there to help support them.
Yeah.
So as we close, just a few housekeeping things too. Just always a quick reminder that you can visit the Penn State Extension website for resources on nearly any topic you can imagine, but obviously for farm stress, mental health resources as well. And that extension website is www.extension.psu.edu. I always encourage you to feel free to share this podcast with others. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Buzzsprout, or really any other podcast platform that you listen to. And just that reminder to be sure to take care of yourselves, be on the lookout to help others, and join us next week, next time for our next podcast in the series. So thanks again, Jeff. And Jeff, maybe I'll let you lead us out of the podcast with how you usually end all your emails, and you usually give me you usually give me the farmer out, I feel like. So I want to actually hear you
Yeah.
say it.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for listening and thank you, Amber. Farmer out.
All right. Thanks, everyone.